Leo Gerard is Sudbury through and through. Everything he believes in and everything he does today is because he grew up in one of the greatest union towns in Canada.
Brother Gerard started working at Inco when he was 18. There he became an activist in Local 6500 and took an interest in union education by workers, for workers. He rose to the ranks of Steelworkers structure, taking on the role of staff rep, then director of District 6, and later national director before serving 2 terms as the International Secretary-Treasurer.
He was appointed president in February 2001 and was elected into the International by a one-member, one-vote elections held in November 2001. He has been re-elected ever since. Leo's history is Steelworkers' history. He worked in Elliott Lake, Ontario, where health and safety became a defining issue in a hard-fought strike in the 1970s. He was District 6 director when the union took up the first of many battles to ensure workers had a real voice in corporate restructuring.
Leo was there for United Steelworkers 6,500 members in Sudbury during the strike that began in 2009. For nearly a year, they walked the picket line. Those workers chose to stand up against Vale and their Brazilian ownership, who had a total lack of respect for the members' safety, values, and quality of life. His leadership was instrumental in seeing our brothers and sisters through this tough time. He has taken great effort in building solidarity with other workers throughout the world. Over the last decade, Brother Gerard has been a driving force in growing the union through mergers with other like-minded organizations, through international alliances.
He has worked hard to blend the cultures of other unions in the transition to what is now the United Steel, Paper and Forestry, Rubber, Manufacturing, Energy, Allied Industrial, and Service Workers International Union. I'm sure he doesn't own a piece of clothing without a USW logo on it someplace.
Leo Gerard is committed to winning the battle for pay equity and gender equality in the workplace and for protecting the hard-earned jobs that our members need. He's a champion of health and safety and the environment. He stood side by side with our union members when we brought the fight to large multinational corporations such as US Steel, Rio Tinto, and Crown Packaging. His vision, his life's work, has been to bring strength and solidarity to as many workers as possible in every sector of the economy.
These are all Leo's personal goals as much as they are the goals of the union. Please join Rick and I in welcoming a man who needs little introduction.
Her brother, his brother, our brother,
the International President of the United Steelworkers,
Mr. Leo Gerard.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you.
Say that again. Everybody hear that?
Here we go.
Listen, I was just sitting there shocked that all the bullshit that the communications department writes about me that they read off. But when I get an introduction like that, I often reflect back on my parents. I started kicking around with my dad, going to union events when I was about 14. If my mom and dad were here to have heard that, my dad would have been very proud, and my mom would have thought that it was all a pack of lies. Je veux vous dire une couple de mots en français parce que je sais qu'on est à Québec. Puis, il y a des membres de District 5 qui sont ici. Puis je dis souvent, quand j'ai la chance de me rencontrer avec eux autres, au Canada, c'est souvent le Québec, la province de Québec, qui nous donne une direction pour nous montrer qu'est-ce qui peut arriver si des programmes de recrutement, des programmes d'éducation, des programmes de changer la loi au Québec pour faire certain que la loi d'anti-scab va être là. Puis je suis très fier quand je viens à Québec. Ça me donne une chance de pratiquer ma langue maternelle puis j'ai pas la chance souvent. Déjà, je disais qu'à Pittsburgh, il y avait seulement 2 francophones, moi puis Mario Lemieux. Puis Mario Lemieux, il m'appelle pas trop souvent. À la caucus de Québec, à Pittsburgh, il y a 2 personnes dans la caucus, moi et Mario, puis on changeait qui était en charge. Let me just say that I've had a lot of opportunity to think since yesterday morning when we watched those videos. And I've never seen those videos before yesterday. And I was thinking about how powerful they were and how big of a disgrace this should be to Canada. And you got to think about it for a minute, not just watch the video, but think about what it says. Think about it in your life. Think about it if it was your Francophone heritage, whatever your heritage is. Imagine now if they came and took your kids and said, we're going to take them off to a boarding school and we're going to take the French out of them. Or we're going to take them here and we're going to take that out of them. We have to, as a union, be leaders. And as I said to the District 6 folks, all my time in leadership in the union, I've wanted to make sure that our union was not seen as what I call a slot machine union. You don't put your dues in every month and then at collective bargaining time pull the lever and see how many coins fall out and then judge yourself whether or not you're a good union by that. We all do the best we can by that. But the way we should view ourselves is as an instrument of social and economic justice. We should see ourselves as a union 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year long. Because there's so many things that happen in our communities, in our society, that are unjust, and that not enough people are speaking out. But if we lead, history will show that others will follow. I just said to Ken this morning, how old is the Humanity Fund? The Humanity Fund is now 31 years old. We started that fund based on an Ethiopian famine, where one of the speakers that will be here today, Stephen Lewis, approached the union and said, could you help raise some money so we could fight the Ethiopian famine? I was the district director, Gerard was the national director, Len Stevens was district director, and Clement Godbout was the district director in Quebec. We all had a chat and said, rather than just giving a check, let's try and raise money so that we can have funds to do this kind of stuff whenever it occurs. We created the Humanity Fund. Not only did we help fight the Ethiopian famine, but we set up a process whereby we would donate, and we were one of the first unions to start that. We would donate to help women's shelters so they could get away from abuse. We started to work union to union. We started to figure out how to get the government to lever the money we'd put in to build projects in Latin America or someplace else in the world to help workers. We did those things and many, many more because we wanted to make sure that we weren't a slot machine union, that we would have the wherewithal to take on the social and economic justice fights of the day. And we decided that we needed to do an opportunity for more people to participate in our union. Historically in the union, the way you got recognized was you got on the grievance committee or you got on the bargaining committee and you did good work and your staff would recommend to the director, look, I see that Joe is doing a really good job, you ought to keep an eye on Joe. It was a very narrow path to activism. We started to broaden that path. In District 6, we created the Women of Steel program. I don't know how many people in this room were at the National Women's Conference or how many were listed, I think, a couple of weeks ago at the International Women's Forum. We had over 1,000 women at our international conference in Pittsburgh. This may surprise you. Our International Women's Conference is the largest single gathering of working class women in North America. In Lynn Williams' day, Lynn decided that all that expertise we had in the union, when they retired, why would we give up that expertise? Let's find a way to get them involved and keep them involved in the union if they want to be. And we created SOAR, the Steelworker Organization of Active Retirees. Again, in every province in Canada and in almost every state in the US, we have a SOAR chapter or more. And in every one of those SOAR chapters decide how they can participate in the life of the union. And my understanding is that we had a SOAR conference at the beginning of this conference, and more than 50 of our retirees, our SOAR activists, were at that conference from all over Canada. And we ought to congratulate them because most of us wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. And I want to thank them for it. And as I said, we want to broaden the base of the union. So SOAR allows us to keep history and keep that skill there. The Women's Conference allows us, the Women's Network we win, and we put that into the Constitution that we needed to have women's committees in our locals, give people a chance to participate. We developed a leadership scholarship program that's 4 years long, and you're there because somebody recommended you, and the International set up a separate fund, a scholarship fund where we pick up the cost if you're one of the people selected over the 4-year program. And then we concluded that that wasn't enough because once we got all those people, how would we then nurture them into advanced leadership? So we created the Lynn Williams Leadership Program where if you finish the 4-year program, you can get then possibly into the Lynn Williams Leadership Program. And there we'll try to find ways to get you involved in whether it's running for office in the local city, running for office nationally, running for parliament, doing whatever, finding ways to have that plant our leaders all over the country, get them elected to different things. We have our Back to the Locals training program. I was with our health and safety people in the US the other day, and I said to Mike Wright, I said, how many people did we put through health and safety training last year in the US? And I assume the Canadian numbers are equal or better. We put 25,000 people through health and safety training. Ask yourself if you know any other union that did that. What we're trying to do is position the union to not just be effective today, but to be effective tomorrow and the years after tomorrow, and to nurture and develop the talent in our union. I actually envision, if I live long enough, that someday there'll be a woman sitting at our table as the president of the union. I don't say that just to be parochial, but when that happens, it will have happened because we've built the programs and the foundation for people to come up through the union, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race, regardless of their religion, regardless of their color. We need to provide the opportunity for people to come up through our union and be a reflection of our society. In the US, in the long term, in the next 10 years, fat, middle-aged white guys like me aren't going to be the majority. Shit, I'm not even the majority now. What we're going to be is part of a very diverse society. And in the long run, if our membership doesn't look like our society, people are going to be reluctant to participate. And our obligation, each and every one of us, and this is one of the things that really frustrates me, each and every one of us that are activists in the union should be committed to growing the union, should be committed to finding opportunities to organize, be committed to finding opportunities to mentor people that come up through the organization so that they will help you help others. Because if we do that, our union will grow and be strong and be a voice for social and economic justice. If we don't do that, we'll atrophy and die. I have a tremendous amount of pride in the fact that our union has had more mergers, both US and Canada, than any other union. And part of the reason that happens is when we go and present ourselves to the organization that's looking for a merger partner, we come with open hands. We tell them all of our advantages, and we don't run away from our mistakes. And we tell them what our vision for the future is. And our vision for the future is a strong and powerful and effective labor movement. You know, I just was quickly running through my head when Kenny was talking about TWU. That's our most recent merger. And I think in that period of time, I could be wrong, but just since the merger, we've thrown way over 100 people, maybe a couple of hundred people we've put through training, which we committed to do. We merged with the IWA. IWA's history was a lot like ours, a proud, aggressive, socially active industrial union. And we made the commitment to the members of the IWA that we were going to take their history and their knowledge and merge it with us. And together we have the same history, and we'd fight for the same future. We got a hell of a fight that we have to have in the IWA, former members. And we've got to have that fight not just in British Columbia, not just in Ontario, not just in Quebec. We've got to have that fight all over the place. And it is to stop the goddamn export of raw logs that are taking away the value of our resources. You know, I'm going to go through some of this. I was in the US when they wanted to build the Keystone Pipeline. And I took two positions. First position was, there's no way we're going to support a Keystone Pipeline if the pipes are going to come from China and India and other places and be inferior to the quality that we could make. Secondly, my position against it is Canada shouldn't be exporting raw crude. Canada should build a refinery, open a refinery that they've already closed, turn it into a finished product, give our members jobs making pipelines and making way for that crude to make it into a refinery. And once you've refined it, if you think you don't need it, then export the finished material so that you're not exporting jobs, you're exporting finished products. So let me say, this fight is a fight that can't be won by just our members that work in the steel mills that make the pipe and tube. This fight has to be won across the country on the principle that what we have by way of our natural resources in Canada aren't leaving this country until the value added to that resource is here, and that resource creates jobs here, and then if we export anything, it'll be finished products, not exporting our damn jobs. And just for the record, this is really tough. We have members in the rail industry. We have members that love to see in fact, my son-in-law is an engineer on the railway. But I tell you this, the safest way to move any liquid material, whether it's liquefied natural gas, whether it's oil, whether it's water, the safest way to export and to move that, not export it, the safest way to move that is by pipeline. And if you think, hang on, if you think that's not true, ask our members in Quebec about the explosion and what it did. That happens, maybe not with the same explosion, but that happens with derailments on a regular basis, and our members on the railway on the track gangs, as we call them. They fight day in and day out to make sure that those tracks are the best that they can be. Make sure that that rail isn't coming from some place in India or China or Bangladesh. And I have nothing against those workers. God help them. They're fighting for their job just like we should be fighting for ours. But we need to have it as a matter of principle. We need to be in every province. We need to be stating our ground that if we're going to have infrastructure investments using Canadian taxpayer dollars, then those dollars are going to be made for buying infrastructure that's going to be made in Canada. And when we take that position as a union, not just as a group of workers that make pipe, or just not a group of workers that cut logs, not just a group of workers that harvest fish, we represent fish plant workers in the Atlantic Canada as well. We've got to make that as an issue of principle with our union across the country. And I'll bet you this, I'll bet you if you took a poll of the population, 75 or 80% of them would be with us, because they don't like seeing our jobs exported and our raw material, raw resources abused like that. You know, one of the fights that's going on right now, which is really terrible, we're on the verge of losing the steel industry in both US and Canada. In fact, I was on the phone yesterday. I left for a while to do a conference call. We're going to have a big meeting in Washington on, I can't remember now, Tuesday or Wednesday. And all of the major CEOs are coming. And the reality is that unless things change, none of those steel companies can survive. And the reason that that's happening is the same reason it's happening in Canada. Except Canada's worse. US Steel came and took Stelco and raped it. They destroyed it. They took the marketing arm out, they took the technology out, they took the computer systems out, they did all of that stuff. And then when the poop hit the fan with the price of steel, there was no infrastructure there to save Stelco. So now we're working to try and find buyer for Stelco. Algoma Steel's in bankruptcy again. We're working to try and save Algoma Steel. One of the visions that we have, if we can pull it off, is to put Algoma Steel together with Stelco and create a very powerful Canadian-owned steel company that would be able to match any steel company in North America, and then take that knowledge and technology. At one time, Algoma was the lowest cost per ton producer in Canada, lowest cost per ton producer in North America. But you can't compete. A company can't compete against a country. You know, I'll give you an example on steel, it'll blow your mind. In 2003, China produced 2.5 to 300 million tons of steel. The United States and Canada combined consume about 140 million tons of steel. And we make about 125 tons of steel. So we don't make enough to meet our demand when the economy is going well. The Chinese were about 250 to 300 million tons. Does anybody know what China's steel capacity is now? 1.2 billion tons. 700 million tons more than they consume. What do you think they're doing with that? They're dumping it into Canada, they're dumping it into the US, they're dumping it into Mexico, they're dumping it into Brazil, they're dumping it into UK, they're dumping it into Europe. And every one of those steel industries in those countries is under threat. And our damn government is sitting on its hands in Canada, in the US, in Britain, in the fucking EU, excuse the language, that they're prepared to say that they're going to give the Chinese what they call market authority, which means that they get a break on, if we have to find a case that they've been dumping, they get a different measurement. Then you got to ask yourself, what the hell is going on in this country? What the hell is going on in the industrialized world? And one of the things that isn't going on is workers aren't showing their outrage enough. I have nothing against Chinese workers, but I have something against the system that lets them do this and us have no response. I'm against the system that pits us one worker against the other. I'm against the system that says it's okay if we sacrifice your jobs because we'll be able to have some kind of potential democracy with China or Vietnam. I tell some of my colleagues and some who aren't my colleagues in the US with the TPP, if I had grown up in the United States, at my age, I'd either be a Vietnam vet or I'd have been living in Canada as a draft dodger, they would have called it. They had tens of thousands of men and women who went to die because they were told they had to fight Vietnam to stop the spread of communism. And now we're in bed with Vietnam that pays 26 cents an hour minimum wage. We're in bed with China that has a $2 a day wage. And our governments are silent. Where's the outrage? If we can't get angry about that, what can we get angry about? Somebody might say, well, if Stelco doesn't reopen, no big deal, we can get steel from China. When the community dies, when the tax base is gone, who's going to fix the potholes? Who's going to build the infrastructure? Where will the infrastructure come from? I don't want you to assume. I don't want you to assume that we can't win these fights. I'm convinced and I'm blessed that I get to travel all over North America. I'm not that good an international traveler. I don't like it that much. So Kenny goes for me. But I'm convinced from what we do that we can win this fight. But we can only win it if we're willing to put up the fight. And on its most basic terms, we have to take a position that Canada's natural resources are to be developed for Canadians. You know, I used to say to people, why do you think Stelco's in Hamilton? Stelco is not in Hamilton because that's where the iron ore was. Stelco is not in Hamilton because that's where the coal was. Stelco was in Hamilton because it was less than 50 miles to Niagara Falls where cheap energy was. These things aren't hard to figure out. But then we've got to figure out what the policy is for the fight back. You heard yesterday about Jennifer Granholm talking about trade deficits. Canada has supported every trade deal that's been negotiated. In fact, if truth be told, Brian Mulroney and Ronald Reagan negotiated the first trade deal that the rest of the trade deals have been modeled on. It was the US-Canada trade deal. Harry Hind and Harry was my assistant. The deal was struck and signed just before Christmas in 1989, if my memory's right. By the end of January of that next year, Inglis, Local 29, Lynn Williams Home Local, employed 3 weeks. It was announced that Inglis was closing and they were moving to Evansville, Indiana. We negotiated a pretty good closure package, but those jobs left. The first jobs to leave the country as a result of the US-Canada trade deal went to Evansville, Indiana. In Evansville, Indiana, within a matter of less than 6 months, after NAFTA was signed, the jobs that have moved to Indiana from Toronto, plus the jobs that had been in Indiana before, they moved to Mexico. That's the trade deal that all the other trade deals have been modeled on, was the Canada-US trade deal. And I can remember Brian Mulrooney calling our union, and me in particular, and Bob White, economic terrorists, because we were telling the story about what happened to these jobs. Sisters and brothers, someone said yesterday that this is our time. I actually believe, and I've believed this for a while, that the Canadian public and the US public are ready for massive changes. They're ready for that fight about using our resources to create jobs in our own country. And if we don't lead that fight, who will lead it? You know, I say this to the board and I say it to myself. In the morning, when you wake up, if you're a committed union activist or a union employee or elected union official at the local or national, international level, you wake up that morning and you're on your way to your first meeting. If you don't feel some fire in your belly, or if you feel that things are going okay, then first chance you get, quit. Because if you think things are going okay, you won't have the fight in your belly. And if you don't have the fight in your belly, we won't have any ability to win. I always also say, I can't guarantee that we'll win every fight, but I can guarantee if we don't fight, you'll lose. I also say it's not worth thinking that if you're banging your head against the wall, because it'll feel good when you stop, that's really a way to fight back. The way you need to fight back is to fight back strategically and smart. And as I said, we've been trying to broaden the base of the union internally, but we're also trying to broaden our reach externally. And what we've done then is not just mergers in our union, but what we've done is tried to broaden our base internationally. We've created strategic alliances, meaningful alliances where we share our knowledge and our participation. We've created a strategic alliance with the C&M CUT in Brazil, largest industrial union in Brazil. We have exchanges. We send people to Brazil, they send people here. When we have things going on with nasty Brazilian companies or they have with nasty Canadian or American companies, we collaborate together. In fact, there's probably people in this room from my home local at Valet at 6500 who went on some of those trips to Brazil and participated and were brought around and worked together in solidarity. We did the same thing in rubber and we did the same thing in chemical and a whole bunch of others. We've got alliances with the Australian Workers Union and the CFMEU, the Construction, Forestry, Energy and Mining Union. We have strategic alliance with them. We've got an alliance with the marine workers so that if we're trying to bring about some strategic pressure and someone's putting something on a boat, the marine workers will tell us where that boat is, where it's going, and when it'll arrive in case we want to give them a welcome. And we do those things. We've got a strategic alliance with IG Metall, the largest private sector industrial union in Germany. And again, we do each other's culture and know each other's processes. We've got a brand new union. How many of you have heard of Workers Uniting? Raise your hand. Oh, quite a few of you. I was surprised. Good. What we did was with Unite the Union in Great Britain, we not only created a strategic alliance, but we created a new organization called Workers Uniting. Workers Uniting is now registered in 4 countries, Britain, Ireland, Canada, and the United States. Workers Uniting is now affiliated to Industrial. Did Yerke speak here? When Yerke spoke, I'm not sure if he mentioned it, but Workers Uniting is now affiliated to Industrial, the Global Industrial Secretariat. As Workers Uniting, we're the second largest affiliate of Industrial, and we did that so that we could have more influence in that process. We've got our strategic alliance with Mineros, and my friend that is here has been a true friend and ally, and someone who I consider a hero in labor, and that's Napoleon Gomez, who I saw a while ago. There he is over there. Napoleon, raise your hand. And you all know the Mineros story, and Kenny tells me that the book is in your kit, or in the kit of the speakers. I'm not sure what kits it's in, but if you haven't got his book, get it. It's called The Collapse of Dignity, and it's about Napoleon's fight for dignity for his members. So we've built that structure. So we're building a structure internally so that we have a broader base of possible participation. Then we've got this structure that we're building internationally so that when we're in our fights with global companies, we can bring global pressure. That is moving. We've now got people that, in fact, at our paper conference that's going on as we speak here, we've got workers from other parts of the world who are actually sitting down developing strategy on how we're going to deal with those employers on a unified basis. So we're doing all of those things. Let me just... I also wanted to just say a few words about my party. I've been a member of the New Democratic Party and a loyal supporter, I guess, as early as I can remember. In fact, the first person I ever campaigned for was John Rodriguez when he ran for Parliament, and I was still living at home with my mom and dad. There's been some people that have been taking cheap shots. We lost the election. There's a complicated set of reasons why we lost the election. And one of the reasons I think we all, including leaders in our union and leaders in the party and leaders in other places, we all campaigned that Harper had to go. Got to get rid of Harper. And then soon as the polls started to jiggle, the sense that they had to move to one that was going to get rid of Harper. And one of the things that really pisses me off is that the media publishes the results of the campaigns and of the elections, I should say, as it moves across the country. So by the time I turned on my TV to watch what was going on, CBC and CTV were already announcing that the Liberals had won every seat in Atlantic Canada. If you hadn't voted yet and you lived in Alberta, what did that tell you? And then you've got some people who are saying that the party wasn't progressive enough. I saw a note that Ken and others signed. Our party fought for a national pharmacare program, a national childcare program, increased corporate taxes, $15 an hour minimum wage, expanding Canada Pension, having a strong public sector that delivers services, rejecting the TPP, and an industrial strategy to create good jobs by exploiting our resources for ourselves. How the hell can that not be progressive enough? How can that not be progressive enough? How the hell do you think the Conservatives would do with this? And what do you think that, he should do an advertisement for a dye for his hair, for Trudeau. What do you think he's going to do on this? Somebody said nothing, that's what I believe. It's us. It's us. I actually believe that the most important fight we can have now about jobs is tackling the issue of how we use our resources. Doing what Jennifer Granholm said, figuring out how to have our energy as what I call all of the above. Do it in the most environmentally sound way. Get our universities being able to have kids come to college so that they don't have debt. We're a little sanctimonious in Canada because our college cost has been kept a little lower than US cost. My daughter, more than 10 years ago now, was going to Cambrian College in Sudbury. Some of her books for early childhood education were $700. 10 years ago. That's a ripoff. That doesn't get included in the tuition cost. How do we make those things so that kids can go to college and not have debt? These are all fights worth having. But we can't think of ourselves as a slot machine union. We are an instrument of social and economic justice. We have to pick those fights, as I said, and fight strategically. Not everybody can be in every fight. Not everybody can give all their time. Not everybody has the freedom to do all of those things. But when we all come together and decide we're all going to do our bit, then we're on the pathway to success. I get frustrated, I really do, that we don't tell our story well enough. We don't tell our story about how we stand for people to stop the killing. I don't know how many of you saw it this week. Today's Tuesday, I guess. Don Blankenship. How many know the name Don Blankenship? A few of you, probably minors, probably. Don Blankenship was the chairman and CEO of a mining company that killed hundreds of people. The Upper Big Branch mine exploded, killed a dozen people. Another mine exploded, killed another bunch. Another mine exploded, killed another bunch. And the union, with the mine workers union, with our support and encouragement and participation of our health and safety department, pushed the government, pushed the state government, pushed the federal government to lay charges. They laid charges. Took 3 years after they laid the charges. And this week, he was found guilty, and he's the first CEO to be put in jail for a year. Our objective isn't necessarily to put people in jail. Our objective is to have safe workplaces. And if you're going to disregard your obligation to a safe workplace, you shouldn't get off scot-free. What I found very fascinating is the Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez, in the US, issued a statement yesterday. And in the statement, what he said is that justice wasn't done, because the maximum fine under law, the maximum punishment under law for being found guilty with willful disregard, the maximum is 1 year. And the Secretary of Labor in the United States said that that wasn't justice, that that penalty has to be expanded so that people who disregard their obligation will get treated the same way as any other murderer gets treated. You don't get 1 week. You don't get 1 week for every fatality. Don Blankenship, during his term as CEO of that coal company, had 52 deaths under his watch. And what the United Mine Workers said is the equivalent of 1 week in jail for every life he took is not real justice, and our fight is not over yet. We got to fight to change the law so that if you're found guilty of willful disregard, no different than if I was driving my car drunk and went through a stop sign and ran over some poor person, I wouldn't get 1 week in jail for that killing. I would probably get life. So willful disregard, we're having that fight in the U.S. to extend that penalty from 1 year to just as any other murderer you would get, and you'll get whatever punishment you'd get for that. For 52 deaths during a CEO's time, he should get goddamn life imprisonment, and we shouldn't be afraid to have that fight ongoing in Canada. I spend so much time meeting with so many assholes in the U.S. that when I get a chance to vent, I could go on forever. I'm so pissed off every morning. By the time I have my third cup of coffee, I've quit shaking. You know, sisters and brothers, I really mean this. If you ever wake up one morning and think things are good, go find your replacement and quit. We got a lifetime of fighting ahead of us. And your obligation is to find people younger than you and make sure they're ready for the fight, because it ain't necessarily going to get resolved on your watch or my watch. Let's not be fools. We got to build an instrument. We got to build an organization that is smart, an organization that's unified. I take tremendous pride, by the way. Do you like our logo, USW, with the hands helping each other? That was designed by our executive board. Stevie screwed me up really bad on that one. That I wanted to have, I wanted to have people in different hats looking, you know. And we brought that thing to the board, and people were looking at it, and there were sort of some of them were, Steve says, the damn thing looks like the Village People. God. If we had merged with the, I guess I'll tell tale out of school here. We had merged with PACE, and the president of PACE kept pushing me. Everything's good, but we need a new name. We need a new name. We're a big union now. We need a new name. So I said, Boyd, leave it with me, and give me a couple of days, and I'll try to figure something out. So I figured out a name that even I can't remember. And it says in the merger document, to be known as United Steelworkers. Then they said, well, we need a different logo. So we got helping hands. And United Steelworkers, USW. So down below it says, Unity and Strength for Workers, USW. So part of our program is not just to do these programs, but to build unity in our union. And occasionally you get people who think that they're being smartasses or something, and will post nasty stuff to websites, thinking that that's what's going to mobilize their local union or their staff or somebody to do something that they dream should be done. Remember this, once you post that crap to your websites, the union busters go find it. And that little tidbit becomes the center of their campaign. So when you can, in your newsletter, on your websites, and do whatever, help us build the union. Help us merge with that union. By the way, we've got 2 more mergers going on. One of them will be voted on in about 3 more months. The other one's still in its infancy, and it's being nurtured along. But part of the reason that that happens is because of the good work that you do. It's because of the good work that our locals do. It's because of the good work that our staff do with our locals. It's about the programs that we build that you can access. And if we keep that silent, it makes our job that much harder. So really one of the things that before I close that I want to tell you is be proud of your work. Be proud of the work that you do in your workplace. Be proud of what you do within your union. Be proud of what you do in our labor movement. Be proud of what you do as we build an instrument of social and economic justice to make life better, as we build a union that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. does its stuff. A union that's trying to find its way into the more modern society. People joke with me because I carry a flip phone. It's all I need. In fact, I was at the Capitol the other day in Washington, and my phone rang, and I took it out and I flipped it open, and some smart-ass guy said, "Look, he's got that thing from Star Wars." Beam me up, Scotty. But I'm really serious about that. You don't give yourselves enough credit, and we don't give you enough credit. And we don't brag about our victories often enough. And we let people take shots at us. And we let people say things in the media that aren't true. And we don't respond, or we don't respond well enough. Those are all things you need to talk about in your local with your staff, and keep in mind what the union is trying to do. We're trying to broaden the base so that we're a more effective social and economic justice organization as a trade union. And we're broadening ourselves internationally so that we're in a fight. It's not just a fight at the plant gate. If it's a fight with a global company, as I don't know if there's anybody in here from Crown, we went all over the world. We sullied their name. We sullied the name of Rio Tinto with the workers from Alma. So let me close by telling you that I mentioned I have 2 daughters and a granddaughter and a grandson. I've been at the point for some time now where I know that this fight isn't about me, or it isn't for me. It isn't about Ken, and it's not for Ken. It's not about Marty, and it's not for Marty. This fight is for the next generation. Most of you are going to be okay. Most of you will probably have a better life than you thought you'd have. But that isn't the issue. The issue is, what do we leave behind for the next generation? What do we leave behind by way of an institution that can protect and defend the next generation? What do we have as an institution that can make our lives better so that those coming after us can inherit that better life? That's the challenge. Think big, or as Bernie says, Bernie Sanders, think huge. Huge. When I was first elected as a director, and we'd travel, my kids were younger, and I always wanted to bring them home a gift. And after a while, they got tired of T-shirts, and they wanted, if I was bringing something, bring something more unique. So this one day, I'm in San Francisco for some meeting, and we had an afternoon break. So I decided to go for a walk and look for gifts. So I went walking towards the San Francisco bridge, and along the way there's a pile of gift shops. And I'm looking in the gift shop window, and I see this brass rat about that big. And it's got 2 eyes, looks like marbles. But whichever way you move, to the left or to the right, it felt like those eyes were watching you. And I thought, that'd be really cool for my kids. They'd think that we're watching them all the time, and I think I'm going to get one. So I went in the store and I asked the old guy, I said, how much for the bronze rat? He said, $25. I said, oh, that's not bad. He said, but it's $250 for the story. I said, I don't want the story, I just want the bronze rat. He said, okay, if that's what you want. He gives me the bronze rat, I give him the 25 bucks. I start walking back, got to go across the bridge, and I hear behind me, and I look, there's like 20 rats. I said, this must have been a bad area of town or something there. They didn't pick up the trash or something weird. I started walking a little bit faster. I looked behind, there's like 100 rats. I said, holy shit. So I start to run, and if I'm starting to run, you know it's serious. So I start to run. And as I'm running, rats are jumping on my pants and grabbing me and trying to bite my ankles and everything else. And I'm just getting near the bridge, and I said, these rats don't want me, they want this bronze rat. And I take the rat and I throw it as far as I can. And it lands out in the water. The rats run right past me, they jump off the edge of the bridge and into the water, and they all drowned. I said, wow, I go back, see this old guy. So I make my way back. There's the old guy sitting there. Big grin on his face. He said, ha, 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 ha. I knew you'd be back. He said, you want the story, don't you? I said, no, I want a bronze liberal. Take care, thank you.